I am Ione Mitchell, a mathematics teacher of the Springer Memorial School. I am also a crochet artist, and today I want to show you how mathematics is used in crochet. I hope you will find the presentation interesting and educational. The craft of crochet has been around since about the 17th century. We use string, which we call yarn, and this is made of various materials: wool, cotton, rayon, bamboo, and acrylic are just some examples. We also use a special hook, and what we do is that we create loops around the hook, and this will help us to make beautiful pieces of clothing, bedding, and accessories such as earrings, bags, belts, or even shoes. Every crochet artist knows the importance of mathematics to our craft. We must take accurate measurements in order to produce pieces that are to the exact size. We must also perform calculations sometimes. Take for example, I followed a pattern to create a dress for a little girl, and I might want to create that pattern for her mom also. I need to be able to perform the necessary calculations so that I will know the stitch count to use to create the dress for the mom. And the other way in which mathematics is used in crochet is in the creation of patterns. Patterns are based on multiples of a certain number. And when we do not follow the sequence for the multiples of that number, then we tend to make mistakes. And you might have heard someone say, I don't like crochet because I make too many mistakes and I have to pull down my work. That happens when our stitch count is not in line with the sequence for the multiples of the number on which our pattern is built. These crochet hats are called beanies, and they're very popular, especially among males in Barbados. Beanies can be made from rectangles, or they can be made from circles. Today I will show you how we construct beanies from circles. As I mentioned earlier, before we can begin any crochet piece, we must take accurate measurements. And since I'm making a hat, then I must take the measurement of the distance around the head. Now this measurement will be the equivalent of the circumference of a circle. As you can see, the measurement around the head of this mannequin is 22 inches. So once we know the circumference of the circle is 22 inches, to find out the diameter of the circle. And the reason why we need to find the diameter is, if you think about it, it is easier to measure the diameter of a circle than trying to measure the circumference of a circle. Now, to take you back into the mathematics class, we know that in order to calculate the circumference of a circle, we use the formula C is equal to pi d. But this time, we do not want to find the circumference because we already know it. So we need to find our diameter. And to do that, we have to transpose the formula. So diameter is equal to circumference divided by pi. And since it is pi day, we will use 3.14 as the value of pi for this calculation. So that 22 divided by 3.14 will give us 7 inches. So the diameter of our circle needs to be 7 inches. Typically, beanies are based on a multiple of 12, but since I need a little extra room for my brain, I will base my beanie on a multiple of 13. So first, we create a circle using 13 stitches. For round 2, we place 2 stitches into each of the 13 stitches that we created for round 1. This will bring our total to 26 stitches. For round 3, we use what we call the 2-1 sequence. What that means is that in our first stitch, we will place 2 stitches, and then in the next stitch, we will place 1 stitch. Then 2 stitches in the next stitch, then 1 stitch in the next stitch, and we do this all the way around. If you start with 2 stitches, then you should end with 1 stitch. At the end of round 3, we will have 39 stitches. Can you guess the number of stitches that we will have at the end of round 4? If you guessed 52, then you are correct. You would have noticed, if you were paying careful attention, that in round 1 we had 13 times 1 stitches. In round 2 we had 13 times 2 stitches. For round 3 we had 13 times 3 stitches. So now we're going to have 13 times 4 stitches. So yes, we have 52 stitches at the end of round 4. And this time our sequence is going to be 2 1 1 2 1 1. What that means is that in the first stitch I will place 2 stitches, then 1 stitch in the next stitch, 1 stitch in the next stitch, and then I go back to the beginning of the sequence. 2 stitches in the next stitch, then 1 stitch in the next stitch, then 1 stitch in the next stitch, and so on until I come to the end of the round. Do you know how many stitches will be at the end of round 5? Yes, 65 stitches, since we know that 13 times 5 gives 65. This time our sequence will be 2 1 1 1 2 1 1 1. So we are going to put 2 stitches into the first stitch, then 1 stitch into the next stitch, then 1 stitch into the next stitch, and 1 stitch into the next stitch. Then we go back to the beginning, 2 stitches into the next stitch, 1 stitch into the next stitch, 1 stitch into the next stitch, and 1 stitch into the next stitch. And by the end of the round, we will have those 65 stitches. You know by now that at the end of round 6, we will have 13 times 6 stitches, and that gives us a total of 78 stitches. But can you figure out our stitch sequence? We will have 2 1 1 1 1 2 1 1 1 1. So at the beginning we will put 2 stitches into the first stitch, then 1 stitch into each of the next 4 stitches, and then we go back to the beginning, 2 stitches into the next stitch, and 1 stitch into each of the next 4 stitches, and that will give us a total of 78 stitches. And by now our circle has grown substantially large. So let's measure our circle. Now remember, when we did our calculation, we found out that we need to have a diameter of 7 inches. So we need to measure through the center of the circle from one end to the other to make sure that we have 7 inches. And as you can see, our circle has a diameter of 7 inches. So in the next steps, we will not do any more increases. In other words, we will not be trying to make the circle larger. We will no longer use multiples of 13. We will just put 1 stitch into every stitch until we get the length that we want. Now the length of the hat will vary according to what type of hat you want. If you want a nice snug beanie, well then you will want it shorter. If you want a slouchy beanie, we will add a few more rows until you get the length that you need. But as far as the multiples of 13 go, we are sticking to 78 stitches for the rest of the hat. Our beanie is finished. As you can see, it fits well. I am quite happy with the result. This would not have been possible without mathematics, and in particular without our friend Kai. Thank you so much for watching this presentation.